वर्क में थोड़ा नहीं हो लगता। Namaste, welcome to all. As you all know, IDY programs are being held across all states of jurisdiction of CGI Houston. The flagship program will be held in India House at Houston on 21st of June 2020. The theme of this year's IDY is Ghar Ghar Se Yoga, Yoga at Home. Consulate has been organizing various talks by eminent persons of their field. In this category, today we have Dr. Subhash, who is a Padam Shri awardee. He will speak on scientific basis of yoga and value for health and society. Dr. Subhash is Regents Professor at Oklahoma State University in Stillwater and an authority on AI, quantum compounding and Vedic texts. He is a member of Indian Prime Minister's Science, Technology and Innovation Advisory Council since 2018. He has served on academic advisory committees of the Smithsonian and on the advisory boards of several technology companies. He is the author of 20 books that include his autobiography, The Circle of Memory. He has translated several texts from Sanskrit to English, including the Vasikha Sutra of Kannada. He is featured as one of the interviews in the area of mathematics and information in the long-standing PBS series Closer to Truth. So over to you, Dr. Kak. Now Dr. Kak will speak. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much to the Council General of India in Houston to make my presentation a part of their many events associated with the International Day of Yoga. So I'm going to be speaking of yoga from my perspectives as a student of Sanskrit and as one who has translated Patanjali's Yoga Sutra and several other sutras that deal with similar topics, and also my scientific perspective, which comes from computer science, where we are interested in knowing what the nature of consciousness is, and also from quantum mechanics and physics itself, where also the objective is to find what the nature of the observer is. So these things, the scientific inquiry of the individual and the wisdom that yoga provides us sort of have started to come together. But now first, International Day of Yoga. It's being celebrated all over the world because people have recognized that yoga provides many advantages to health, to well-being. And as we know, in modern times, health has become one of the most expensive parts of any country's economy. And also with the pressures that modern life brings, people are encountering chronic issues or problems that were probably not as much a part of life, say 50 or 100 years ago. So there are extraordinary new challenges that every individual feels. And it's generally accepted that yoga provides a resolution to many of these challenges. And right now, yoga is to be found everywhere. You go to any country, from Russia to China to Africa to Latin America to Europe, any country you'll find, in any cities, big or small, you'll find yoga studios. You find a lot of people, both men and women, do it because it brings them a lot of relief. It puts them in touch with their own selves. You'll also find it in the Middle East. In fact, some time ago, a couple of years ago, I was at a conference in Delhi where there were representatives from Iran and even from Saudi Arabia, where it's being encouraged. In Saudi Arabia, it's come in through the Ministry of Sports, and a lot of women are doing yoga. But everybody knows that yoga is more than just physical exercises to keep the body fit. Now, asanas, of course, which is what most people do, that's the doorway to the deeper aspects of yoga, which is what a lot of those who have done the asanas for a few years are drawn to. And more than just the physical health, they take us to the health associated with the whole body-mind complex. Now, let me say something about health and modern medicine for a few minutes. It's being recognized that modern medicine, with all its amazing achievements in surgery and in dealing with infectious agents, so that if there is a crisis in the body, you must go to modern medicine, because the word allopathy itself means dealing with symptoms. So modern medicine is able to deal with or mitigate these symptoms and help the individual. But modern medicine has not been equally successful in dealing with chronic issues related to, let's say, hypertension or chronic pain in the body, or arthritis, and many other chronic issues. And in fact, it's forcing individuals to be dependent on many medications. In fact, there are individuals later on in years who probably take even 20, 30, 40 pills a day without true relief from these patients. Now, from these underlying issues. Now, in addition to this, lack of success in dealing with chronic problems, there are other problems facing modern medicine. For example, it cannot explain the placebo effect. And the placebo effect is that in almost 30 to 40% of the cases, if the patient were to be told that he's getting medication but is actually given sugar pills, or is told that he has had surgery performed even though there was no real surgery, it was a fake surgery, 30 to 40% of the cases, the patients get well. So this is one mystery that one doesn't know the answer to. The second is there is the so-called reproducibility crisis in medicine. From 70 to 90% of all the published research in the biomedical sciences is not reproduced in later experiments. And of course, the reason behind that is that there is a lot of pressure from pharma companies who sponsor research for doctors to probably design their studies not in the in the best manner from the perspective of statistical testing, so that their whole experimentation is biased to confirming what their hypothesis was. And so they go ahead and they publish the results, but later on when other groups try to replicate their work, it doesn't pan out. And therefore, a lot of the medications which are approved at one point by the FDA and by corresponding agencies elsewhere in the world are after a few years withdrawn, or there are side effects found which had not been anticipated, which create more problems than whatever good the medication does. And we see one example of this syndrome in the papers that were retracted after a lot of publicity just last month, papers related to COVID, treatment of COVID, and how hydrochloroquine did not work, and they were retracted because apparently the database did not exist. And so there are these challenges. In many cases, one doesn't even know which studies to be trusted or not. So this is one of the big problems, and therefore one aspect to this problem is that, well, Western medicine treats only the body, and you must treat both the body and mind. And yoga is one side to that, dealing with the body-mind complex. And the asanas help you with the body, but later on, the asanas also help you, asanas and the practice beyond it, also help you to deal with the nature of your mind, which provide you mastery of your own self and make you more effective at your work and at many other tasks. Now, there's also, because of the pressures of modern life, there's also a mental health crisis across the world. For example, in the US itself, until 2-3 years ago, about 60 to 70,000 people were dying of opioid overdose. So in the modern world, a lot of people are addicted to medication of one kind or the other. Some are prescribed by doctors, such as opioids, and then you get addicted to them. And these addictions are also happening in countries like India, one should not forget. And therefore, the promise of yoga to help you deal with your inner world also, in addition to your physical health, becomes very attractive. Now, the sister system to yoga is that of Ayurveda. And as we know, Ayurveda is the science, Veda meaning the science of longevity. Ayur means life. Ayu means life or longevity. So the science of longevity, and a lot of yoga and Ayurveda go together. Ayurveda provides you a way of harmonious living, and yoga is a component of harmonious living. Now, something that's not very widely known, which makes Ayurveda and yoga truly fundamentally different and important, is that according to mathematical logic, as has been discovered in recent decades, it's not analysis in terms of threes, in terms of two, which is like what is done in experimentation, such as the patient is well or the patient is unwell. It's not analysis in terms of binaries that is optimal, but mathematical logic tells us that it's analysis in terms of ternaries. That means in categories of three, which is fundamentally optimal. And now we see that both yoga and Ayurveda operate on categories in terms of threes. In yoga, you have the three gunas. You have sattva, rajas, and tamas, that everybody consists of three tendencies of knowledge, which is sattva, rajas is activity, and tamas is inertia or digesting whatever you have done. So it's not that one should just have one or exclusively focused on one or the other, but one needs to find a balance in these three processes within each individual. So in some sense, what this informs us about is that this is how the mind works. And since the mind is connected with the body, and since how the mind works gets projected in the activities of the body. So if there's harmony in the mind, there will also be harmony in the body. And that harmony is a hallmark of good health. So if you want to have good health, if you want to have the capacity to deal with the pressures of modern life, then both yoga and Ayurveda, because in Ayurveda, these three categories are, of course, the three doshas of kapha, which means water, pitta, which means fire, and vata, which means air. So all the cellular activities have to find a balance between water, fire, water meaning assimilation, uh, fire meaning the activity, the burning, the metabolic processes, and vata meaning taking away after that assimilation has occurred, taking away the effects that constitute away from those cellular activities, and not only in the cells, because the body is a kind of a recursive system, and so is the mind. And these processes occur at many different levels. So this three-way classification is optimal. In fact, in my view, one of the additional things the protagonists of both Ayurveda and yoga can use to build bridges with those who don't know anything about it is that, look, these are systems based on three-way logic. We know mathematically that three-way logic is superior to binary logic, and everything in nature finds the optimal. That is at the basis of physical laws itself. The laws themselves embody what are optimal processes, and therefore this is the right way to look at the body. And if you look at the body the right way, you are likely to also find solutions to illnesses. In other words, your research will probably will help you find cures or solutions. Now, we're not going into details. We are just talking of a methodology, an epistemology of knowledge associated with yoga and Ayurveda. So it'll help you both in dealing with your own body and also providing the kind of advice you need to those around you. And for those who are doing yoga, to help be in touch with their own physical health and with the processes or complexes and pressures going on in their mind in a more effective way. Now, I've mentioned mind and body. So what is the mind? And in what sense is the mind or knowledge of mind that is provided to us by yoga different from how Western knowledge systems tell us? Because you can go to a psychologist, and psychologists also speak about the mind. And in the Western or the naive view, the mind is the complex of your memories, your temperament, your judgment, and your emotions. So what the psychologist tells you is that, well, analyze yourself or don't respond to things, or they will provide you different ways of dealing with the pressures that come to be problematic for you, or in the extreme case, may provide you medication to deal with these pressures, because after all, the mind is also manifested in brain processes. And sometimes the psychologist might think that maybe these brain processes are so much wrapped up in themselves that you need to calm your brain down, or you need to calm your mind down, and so maybe you need to sleep or rest or this or that. Now, the Ayurvedic and the yoga view of the mind is somewhat different. Let me go back to the Western view. In the Western view, the mind is like a vessel, and all that happens to you is stuff that is poured in the vessel, and you're supposed to be born with a vessel of one kind or the other. And there can be some modifications that occur based on your experiences, but basically you're stuck with a vessel. And so you're told that this is all you can aspire to be, or this is all that you can do because of the nature of who you are. And this is also at the basis of the pedagogy in schools. Now, before I present the yogic view of this, let me, for a brief moment, take a detour and mention that the kind of troubles that we see in American cities right now, or European cities, where there are people who are saying that, look, they've been shut out of the economy, that there are fundamental prejudices working against them, and that's why certain segments of the population are not as successful, is, in my view, a consequence of the vessel perspective on the mind, because based on where you come from, you may have certain advantages there are tutors who are teaching you, and you go to school, you are at an advantage compared to some other child who doesn't have the same tutors helping them out at home. So now, in other words, what I'm saying is that a third marker of difference for yoga is the whole pedagogical perspective, which has such significant social implications, as we see now with all the unhappiness that you have getting projected in cities across the world, certainly cities across America and Europe, if not in other countries. Now, the yogic view of the mind is that while there is this complex of memories, which is chitta, ego, which is ahankar, and judgment, which is buddhi, but in reality, this aspect of the mind is an instrument. This is not your real self. This is in Sanskrit called antahakaran. So this is an instrument. The mind is an instrument. The true self, which in Sanskrit is called Atman or Atma, is the flame which projects light, so to speak, or awareness on different brain and mind processes. And because of the nature of the ego, you believe that it's those processes that are you. So you get attached to these processes. And when you don't get success in holding on to what you're attached to, you have suffering and pain. So a lot of what people go through in life, and which suffering and pain leads some people to then get hooked on to addictions of different kind, addictions which are drug based, or addictions related to behavior which is destructive. So a change in the perspective, the change in positioning yourself, the change in finding out for yourself, recognizing it. It's not finding out, it's to recognize in a deep felt way, to recognize that you're not your mind and brain complex. You are that awareness, which is lighting that brain and mind complex. And therefore, then you recognize that you can deal with the fact that your mind is not fixed. Your mind keeps on changing based on what situation you are in. And from that perspective, mind seen as a self is no unity, is no single self. If you see yourself as mind, you are no single individual. And that is another reason why there is suffering, and people fight themselves, because they are fighting between different aspects of their own brain mind complex. So they do certain behavior of which they are ashamed or embarrassed later on, or their behavior is not consistent, and they do things which makes people around them unhappy. and because they are fighting so much with themselves, so they're not effective, they cannot do things as well as they ought to. But if only they were to turn their gaze onto their true self, which is that flame, then they would have access to different cognitive and other capacities and other creative capacities that they did not even know existed. Now, you might say, what does yoga, for example, we all know that this great uh, text of yoga is, there are two great texts, in fact. The two greatest texts of the yoga are the Bhagavad Gita and Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. In the Yoga Sutra, you are told that, well, you may not be as centered in self-discovery, because that yoga, after having um, um, put your body in a state of superior well-being, but as we all know, bodily pain is nothing compared to mental pain or pain associated with the mind. Pain associated with the mind is what can make people in the prime of their health, at the prime of their success, kill themselves, right? So, what is it that makes it difficult for each one of us? Because according to yoga, all human beings are equal, have the same potential. Doesn't matter what background they come from, what race, what region, what their status. Every human being has the same spirit or Atman or Purush or resident. Purush meaning resident in the brain-mind complex. The same flame, let's call it the flame. The same flame, the same capacity is available to everybody. So then why is it that some people do find it harder to make that discovery? And according to the Yoga Sutra, this could be because of clouding, which in Sanskrit is called mala, or it could be because of turbulence, which is called vikshepa, or it could be because of avaran, which is covering. Now, why does this happen? That could be because of, well, sometimes certain temperament that one is born with, but I think everybody fundamentally has that clarity. Children have that clarity, but then due to certain expectations or pressures, sometimes that culture or your economic situation or other situation places on you, or the way you are frustrated, you're not allowed to ask questions, you then place willingly, sadly, or are forced to place these coverings on this flame. And or there is, if you look at the mind as a lens, then there is turbulence in this lens. There's no clarity in that lens. But through introspection, through concentration, and this is what yoga tells you, through different practices, the Ashtanga Yoga of Patanjali, through practices which are universal. This is a science of the body and the mind. Through these practices, you can clear your mind, and a proof of that clarity would be that you would become creative. In fact, what's very interesting is um, uh, people who look at creativity in all kinds of professions, whether it is science or the arts or music or even in business, know that the central insights of creativity or that creative impulse occur spontaneously. If you talk to the greatest scientists in the world, people who have won Nobel Prizes and the like, they'll tell you that, look, that great discovery came to me spontaneously. The greatest scientists would never say that, here, I did it, because I did it would be, first of all, arrogant, that sense of ahankar, that it's my ego. But really, the greatest artists you will find are humble. They would say, well, I was the medium through which my consciousness, or if they don't use that term, that somehow something happened. I had a vision, or I had a dream, or I woke up, I suddenly had that idea, or I was under tremendous pressure. And at the end of that pressure, I suddenly had this flash, and then I had this idea, all of which communicates this idea that this occurs spontaneously and it's not a consequence of any algorithmic thought, which is one of the reasons why people who think about these matters say that computers will never be conscious, because computers only embody algorithms or rules, and rules themselves don't have the capacity of awareness. So a machine can follow rules, a machine can do the kind of processing that the eye does, but the eye does not do the seeing. In fact, in one of the texts, it's stated that the Atman is the seer behind the eye. It's the hearer behind the hearing, behind the ears. It's the person who smells behind the nose, and it's where the speech springs from. So that formulated creative speech cannot be generated by a computer. So there are all these amazing insights that the yoga system provides you. But what are the pitfalls, if you will, in this journey? You do asanas and you do the inner practices, which are, concentration, dharana, samadhi, etc., etc. So what are the pitfalls? The pitfalls is, once you have access to aspects of your mind, you get certain strengths, or certain siddhis, as they call it. You get certain capacities which can make you arrogant, which can make you want to dominate others. And therefore you can, there is this danger, if you don't do it the right way, that you may become an unpleasant person in one way or the other. And therefore the practice of yoga, the very first step in yoga is what are called yamas and niyams, which is moral and ethical preparation. So what you're told is that you should be truthful, you should not want to covet what others have, you should be prepared to be devoted to excellence, you should study yourself, and you should have santosh, which means you should be contented. So if you do all of this and a few others, then you would have that ethical ground which will make it easier to receive all the siddhis and the gifts that will come your way. And that is a wonderful thing. I'm a great admirer, for example, of the Japanese. And what's wonderful about the Japanese, that they are devoted to excellence. They're prepared to work very hard for a long time, because excellence means the slog. In fact, excellence is also enjoined in the Yoga Sutras, and you're told to do tapas. Be on the long haul. Tapasya in Hindi, or tapas in Sanskrit, that you work without, with all the concentration that you can have. And if you do that, then what you produce will be of great value, not just to yourself, but to all of yourself, all of your nation, and all of humanity. Because after all, in this day and age, the whole world is a family. In the Bhagavad Gita as well, you are told, the Krishna teaches Arjuna that you must choose the Shreyas over the Preyas. Preyas is what is pleasing, But Shreyas is something that may not be so pleasing in the short term, but is beneficial in the long term. So excellence or tapas is not prayers, is not delightful in the short term because you have to work hard. But only working hard and with total concentration will you be able to obtain the reward, which is at the end. But now, in this journey, in the Bhagavad Gita, we are also told that you should work without attachment to the reward, because the moment you are attached, you are attached to your mind as a complex of memories. You're thinking of either the future or the past. Attachment is all about memories. You're holding on to your memories. And as long as you're not in the present moment, you will generate processes, your attachments will generate processes which will make it difficult for you to be in the moment. And if you are not in the moment, you will not be able to find that pathway to the resolution or to that creativity which lies there for you. There is another way of looking at the mind spirit complex. You have, or spirit or consciousness, let's call it conscious, mind and consciousness complex. Now, of course, the body and the mind are connected, and the mind resides in the brain. So it is, as I mentioned before, it's the inner instrument, antahakaran, but it's not the base or the basis of your experience. The basis is the light of consciousness. Now, this duality was expressed in the very name that is Arjuna. Arjuna is each one of us. Bhagavad Gita, of course, is this dialogue, this battle between the Kauravas and the Pandavas, but it's really this Dharma Kshetra or Kurukshetra is also the battle that goes on within each one of us. Within each one of us, every human being, there is this struggle between binaries, between opposites, and or between materiality you want to possess, and between transcendence you also want to share or love, exclusivity and sharing. And there is this complex, which is why in this whole Vedic or yoga system, you have this central image of churning within, which is Samudra Manthan. There is also this idea that the outer is mirrored in the inner, which is called this balance or mapping between the Brahmanda and the Pind. Pind is the body, Brahman is the entire cosmos. So in the body are all kinds of tendencies and attitudes, which are binaries. And the objective is to, through churning, through yogic practices, obtain all those capacities that are really your true self. So all the wonderful gifts reside within you, and your suffering is just a consequence of the fact that you have turned away from your true self. Now, the other image that the yoga system has is this binary of the sun and the moon. The sun is that flame, and the moon is our mind, because as you know, the light from the moon is only a reflection of the light of the sun. So the sun is the inner consciousness, and the moon is the mind. Now, you know that the dialogue between Arjuna and Krishna is a dialogue between our mind and our consciousness or sakshin. the witness within us, who is consciousness. Now, since mind is the moon, Arjuna in Sanskrit means the moon. And even in Latin, argentum is the name for silver. Arjuna also means silver. Arjuna means silver because silver is like the moon. In fact, the name Argentina means the land of silver, because that there were silver mines that drew people to go and travel through those lands and occupy those lands. So this is then also yoga is also a way of connecting through the mind to the source of it all. And as I mentioned, while minds are a multiplicity, there are 10 billion or 6 billion human minds. Every mind is unique, but consciousness is one, awareness is one. Of course, in old-fashioned language, you could also say we are all different people, but there is one God. But in the yogic terminology, that God is this awareness, is this witness. This witness is the same. This witness is unattached. This witness is who, if he only knew that witness is us, will give access to us of all kinds of amazing things. As you know, the story in the Mahabharata is that the Pandavas choose the witness, and the witness doesn't fight for you. The witness only witnesses, but he is the true charioteer of the body, where the mind is the embodied self who thinks this is he who is. The reins are intelligence, and the senses are the horses who carry this chariot one way or the other. So yoga then is a whole system which eventually takes one so far beyond the physical practices of the asanas and takes one to universal science of the self. It's not sectarian at all. It doesn't say you have to do this, you have to believe in this or believe in that. What it says is that be like a um, a a sailor in the inner sea, like a sailor who is set out to explore different lands, and you are that sailor, and that sailor will eventually take you to the very nature of your true being. And while you are embarked on that journey, not only would your physical health would be better because you would have more harmony in the various processes going on in your physical body, but you'll also obtain mastery over your mind, and that will bring you all kinds of happiness. Disease is an expression, dis of ease, is an expression of a disharmony that has come into your body. So this process brings you harmony at so many different levels and makes you transcend prejudices, if that is an issue, shows you, because you see the unity in everybody, shows you as a teacher or as a leader of society, shows you different ways of dealing with societal problems, making it easier for those who have been traditionally disadvantaged to show them a way of pedagogy, of education, so that everybody can obtain that potential. The current way, the current pedagogy does disadvantage many poorer segments of society because they don't have access to all the benefits that people, let's say in the middle class or the upper classes have, not necessarily material benefits, benefits also of information, benefits of the fact that people are discussing things over so that the kids also learn those things, but everybody can have it. If we were to introduce yoga in a much bigger way, go beyond the asanas. And I think it's needed very urgently in India. I think in the West, at least looking at the experience of my children who went to American schools where yoga was taught, in India, it needs to be done in a wider way, not just the asanas, but the deeper elements of yoga which help you master your mind, because the mastery of mind takes you to all kinds of benefits. In fact, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna also tells Arjuna, uh, the mind can be the worst enemy one has if you don't know it, if it's not your friend. But if it's your friend, it's the greatest benefit that it can be, because we as human beings ultimately have a mind as the inner instrument. If you don't know how to wield this instrument, it's an instrument like a knife you don't know how to use. You can end up slashing yourself. But if you know how to use it, you can use it as an instrument and do things, and cut apples off branches, or do various constructive things with this instrument. So to conclude, I am so happy that all over the world we have this International Day of Yoga, which provides motivation for those who may not know of it to explore it and to test it out for themselves. There is no dogma in it. It is a path which it's a kind of a journey which anybody can get into on their own and test out the various elements of it. They can do it either through Yoga Sutra or Patanjali or the Bhagavad Gita or many other texts. And there are many modern masters who have also written on it. And this could be a wonderful thing for everybody's health and happiness. Thank you. I'll be delighted to answer any questions that you might have.
First of all, I would like to say thanks, Dr. Subhash, for your wonderful talk, and you had shared lots of rational, scientific aspect of our inner self, which generally people ignore, those who practice the yoga. But I would like to ask one question. Today in the modern world, most of the people trying to see the yoga in a scientific way, and they are conducting various scientific researches to explore the effect of the yoga on various physiological factors. What do you think that the results of those researches is how much close to bring us to the real essence of this subject, the yoga?
Oh, excellent question. Yoga is already used in many Western hospitals as something that the patient can do. There are, classes, etc., etc. But I think what is also necessary and required, and I think some studies are already being done, for example, at S. Vyasa in Bangalore, that's a university which is dedicated to yoga. But further research, clinical research needs to be done so that specific yoga practices, and some of which could be physical and some of which could be related to the way one does meditation or does other mental exercises, so that how they could, for example, be used to reduce blood pressure. I think there are already studies which show that meditation and yoga can help reduce blood pressure quite significantly. So many of these chronic things can be used, well, they have to be scientifically established, but I believe it's also been established that yoga does help one strengthen one's immune system. And that brings us back to, for example, things such as COVID-19, because how COVID-19 virus works is that if your immune system is compromised, then there is more likelihood that it's going to make you extremely ill. So if a person's immune system was stronger, and clearly yogic practices do help make one's immune system stronger, and this has been clinically established already. Therefore, this, together with all the other studies that need to be done, so a lot of research needs to be done, and I suppose some of it is being done already, will take us to other benefits of yoga, which would be helpful to everybody in every country of the world.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Subhash.
On behalf of CGI Houston, I thank you, Dr. Subhaskar, and the audience. And Dr. Subhaskar, we are very thankful for your great speech and giving us your time, precious time. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Namaskar.